All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining in today. Let me make sure I'm not hearing the jazz that I stopped for you, but not for me. Thanks, everybody, for joining in today. Exciting to be here. We've got a really great program and a very special guest joining us, Sari McConnell from Donor Boom. Super excited to tell you about what we're working on together and some ideas that we have flowing between us. So, thanks for joining us once again. This is Reboot and Rejoin, brought to you by the team at the Webinerd. And in just a moment, I'll get to introducing Sari and our team member Shirsi. And here's a little lineup of the topics that we want to cover for you today. It's been kind of an interesting year for nonprofits, especially with their fundraising and events. So in the past year, I think we've all learned a lot, and we can't wait to share those learnings with you. And stick around, we'll share some tips and tricks, a couple of creative uses that we've implemented in fundraising events as a little bonus here. I love this line, ignite generosity. I think it's really important, especially these days. And so I'm really excited to bring in Sari McConnell. Sari, if you don't mind coming on screen with us here, we'll introduce you to the whole group. And Sari, if you don't mind just letting folks know a little bit about your background and why you decided to start Donor Boom and what it's all about.
Sure, Josh. Thanks for inviting me to this session. I'm really excited to talk to you about my favorite topic, which is helping nonprofits raise money. I can't think of a better use of my time and talents than to help incredible organizations doing good in the world, igniting generosity and helping to fuel their goals for what they're trying to accomplish in the community and the world. I was inspired to start Donor Boom because I saw that so many nonprofits whose focus is on programming and delivering services to the community may not have all the expertise that they need or the resources they need to raise the money that they need to accomplish what they want to for the world. So I've gotten involved with a lot of different nonprofits, help them sharpen their pencil. I typically do a pretty deep data analysis because data doesn't lie. It tells you what's working, what's not, and it truly does reveal growth opportunities more effectively than anything that I can think of. And from there, and a lot of discussion with my nonprofit clients, we dive in and do strategic analysis, an annual strategy plan, a 3-year plan, which helps most especially the board, the staff, everyone involved in raising money, lean in the same direction to accomplish their goals. And I'm always looking for growth opportunities. From my perspective, the donor is the engine for growth. And anything that you can do to bring your donor in closer into what you're accomplishing as a nonprofit and build that relationship is going to take you really far in the long term.
Well, just to kind of go into that a little bit more, what we've seen from clients were obviously they were a little nervous about how things were going to happen, how things were going to pivot and change. People were a little nervous about where their funds would come from, what their donors would think, whether people are holding on to money. They don't know the economic outlooks. There was a lot of challenges that were coming up over the last year. I think in one of our meetings that we talked to, Sari even mentioned that, doing something like grabbing a cup of coffee was now considered dangerous to do with a donor. Like we couldn't have that person-to-person contact and that connection like you were talking about. Those hugs were dangerous, we couldn't do that. So yeah, how do we go ahead and give that message and give that love, give that hug in other ways? And I think we figured that out. We've pivoted to some online methods to actually become more innovative and inclusive and actually allow more people to come together in a safer way, in a more convenient way that fits into people's schedules a little bit more.
Now that we've got all these virtual programs, how do we make them competitive? How do they stay relevant? How do you differentiate? These are really important topics, and we hope that you're discussing them with your organizations. So, Sari, back over to you. Thoughts on this one?
Right. Well, first of all, the past year and a half was a very forgiving year when it came to virtual events. If you could get it done, converting your live event to a virtual event, that was a victory. But I'm sure, as all of you have experienced, as the year went on, people got a little Zoom tired. Their expectations after seeing so many Zoom events increased. Like, if you want me to hang out with you for an hour, I want to learn something. I want to meet somebody new. I want to have exposure to something that I wouldn't be able to ordinarily, or I want to be entertained, frankly. And now that we are where we are, your virtual event needs to be what I call on brand with your organization. The quality that you would bring to a live event, you need to be thinking about bringing that same quality level to a virtual event. And you can get really creative. I mean, just because I'm talking about quality and on brand, it doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to be well thought out. Your lighting needs to be great. Your brand needs to be in the background. Your sound needs to be great. And you, of course, need to be making great eye contact and make sure that you are listening to your fellow panelists instead of, taking a nap until it's your turn to talk. But there are a lot of different ways in which you can use these virtual tools now for fundraising. You can cultivate new donors. You can ask an existing donor to invite a couple of her or his close friends and colleagues to join you. And it's super convenient to do that in the middle of the workday if you're doing it via Zoom, and it would never happen like that. Yep. Even at a coffee shop, you wouldn't be able to pull that off.
Yes, so that's donor, a small room.
Right. So that's donor cultivation. And if you really want to make coffee of it, you can, go onto Grubhub, order some cups of coffee and have them delivered to these donors to really wow them. And that's what I mean by being on brand and creating some entertainment value. Then you've got obviously donor solicitation, where you're literally trying to convert a fundraising event that would be in a ballroom onto the screen. Now, just because live events are going to be coming back online, thank goodness, it doesn't mean there's not an opportunity for you to fundraise virtually. In fact, most nonprofits that I'm talking to, they're very seriously considering doing hybrid efforts. There are donors who are not regionally accessible to their live events, might be across the country. There are donors who have health issues, or they might have disabilities, and you can accommodate many of those donors. You just have donors who just don't have time, or they don't want to sit through a dinner or an auction, but they really care about your organization. They want to learn what's going on. They want to know how they can help, and they're there for you. All of these are great donor solicitation opportunities. And virtual events are so much less expensive than live events. So you can invest some money in making your virtual event top notch and still be so much cheaper than a live event. And then the third is, which is my favorite, donor stewardship. That is building the relationship that you already have. When a donor makes their first donation, there's over a 60% chance that they will never donate to you again. And that means, it's a crazy statistic, but for me, that screams opportunity, like in all caps. It means that once your donor has made a donation, they're basically dipping their toe in the water. They want to see what your organization's about, how you're going to react to their donation. Are you going to get to know them? And it's a huge opportunity to connect with donors.
There's kind of a shopping going on there a little bit. Like,
yes,
if I decide I'm going to do business at this shop or with this organization, what's that relationship going to be like?
Exactly. And what you want to convey is warmth. And you can do, and you can do it by the phone, you can do it by Zoom, you can do it live, but it's just one more tool that you have. And the other very important, there's donor recognition and thanking. That's extremely important how you do that. But the other part of that is showing your impact. So virtual events are the perfect way to show impact to a large group of donors or to a few major donors. Any
Mhm.
way you want to slice it, you can literally bring people inside your organization, give them a tour of your homeless shelter, give them a tour of your food pantry. And you can use video and live feed and all kinds of interesting things. You can bring in experts, social workers that help your clients, dimensions of your program that might not be that visible to your donors. You really get to, bring them inside,
Mhm.
and it can be a two-way dialogue. So you can find out from your donors right on the spot, what do they want to learn more about?
Right.
And you can share that. So
Yeah.
very, very effective tool for stewardship.
Some of those conversations that we've had the pleasure of being able to support and listen in on, really engaged conversations. Multiple times I've heard something along, I've been giving for years and I just didn't realize how much you guys did until you started doing these programs where, inviting people in for brief meet and greets or, Q&As, updates and so forth. Before we jump off of this topic, anything you'd like to add, Shirsi?
Yeah, just to kind of reemphasize what Sari was saying, I do think that this new pivot, now that we're at the other end of this pandemic, we're seeing that virtual contact is now much more legitimized than it ever was before. And that's what makes it great. There is that saying, phoning it in. And so when you were just phoning in, calling up those donors here and there, it wasn't really seen as something that nice, right? But now that we have the legitimized virtual contact happening here, people are appreciating it. Also, I'd like to say that it's a great, it levels the playing field a lot. We're seeing that nonprofits that are more remote, as long as they have internet access, they're able to get and retain those larger donors. A lot of nonprofit organizations are in major cities, and that's where the galas happen. That's where the red carpets, the bigger events happen, and they attract more live events. Well, the more virtual you are, the more opportunity there is for people to donate that are across the nation or wouldn't
Hmm.
normally even think of your nonprofit, but your views closely align with theirs and they want to help support your cause. So it's an
100%.
excellent
Yeah.
opportunity to get a more diverse donor donor list, and also increase that stewardship as well.
Yeah, and
Raise
those
it.
local small
Yeah.
groups, what about those
Yes.
folks that supported you, moved away? You can still reach them. You can still bring them
Right.
back home. Yeah.
I love the virtual solutions, especially for nonprofits with very limited resources. Exactly what you said, Shirzi, leveling the playing field. It levels the playing field between very large organizations with tons of resources and the local ones, the small ones under 10 million, under 5 million, under 1
Hmm.
million, who can use these tools to show the impact that they're having in their community. And many donors really like to invest in organizations where they feel they're having a major impact, and that organization is focused in one very specific area. It might even be in your own hometown,
Hmm.
to be able to support what they're doing.
Which segues perfectly because fundraising virtual, we're digital now. It's official. So future trends, what are we looking forward to?
Well, virtual's not going away.
That's right.
Good for
Yep,
us. Good for
and
you.
it is. We have a it's going to be an interesting time, I would actually say, to see how creative, now that folks have gotten kind of, they've been thrown into the deep end, how they're going to emerge and use these virtual tools more smartly. Every single nonprofit should be revisiting their strategic fundraising plan. They should be doing this annually, but especially now, because there are so many underlying fundamentals that have changed since they probably put their fundraising plan together to begin with, and see where they can now strategically insert virtual tools into their cultivation and solicitation and stewardship efforts much more effectively. And as I said at the top of our program, deepening the relationship with your donor, Donors are the engine for growth. So the more creative that you can get with respect to connecting with donors, the better. We might see, Friday afternoon happy hours with nonprofits. We can see live fundraising events that used to be absolutely indispensable go away. That's been an issue in the nonprofit world for quite some time. We have to have them, but gosh, there's so much work and there's so much money. And I don't know, if you really get the strong ROI. So it's going to make a lot of board of directors and executive directors a little braver to take bigger chances and trying to mix things up there.
Maybe less chance for burnout or stress, along the way, right? Sure.
Yeah.
See, what do you think about the future?
Oh, absolutely. I know that particularly in Santa Barbara, there's the gala effect, I think is what we call it here. I don't know if it happens other places where an entire nonprofit would spend 6-10 months planning for a red carpet, and then maybe they would spend $100,000 on the event, but bring in $110,000. And so when you're really looking at the numbers, it doesn't really make sense. However, if we turn it virtual, it becomes a fraction of the cost, and you have professionals helping you every step of the way. So it really increases that ROI, like you were saying. So I really like that. The future trends, of course, as you were saying before, every strategic plan has to have some virtual fundraising elements in them now. There's a lot of tools out there that people can use. Some of them can even be free, but just if they haven't pivoted at this point, they're left behind. That is the future. That's what everyone is expecting at this point. Also, to kind of point back to something that you had mentioned earlier, Sari, you were talking about what was it, this last year, people were just happy that an event happened.
Yes.
But moving forward,
yes.
What do you see moving forward? Like this upcoming year, what are people expecting now?
Well, as I said before, they're expecting a very well executed virtual event. They are expecting, I think, nonprofits to ease back into live events. So I don't think that anybody thinks that virtual events are going away anytime soon. And I think there's actually a ton of growth opportunity. But what's interesting to me is there's a lot when you put together a live event. Yes, you're spending a lot of energy, possibly too much energy, on the actual nuts and bolts of executing the event, the tablecloths, the table seatings, all of that stuff. But if you want to get the strongest ROI out of a live event, it's like the swan who looks elegant above the water and is paddling furiously below. You've got to be working really hard before, during, and after the event on a strategic level to accomplish your goals. To rely simply on the fact that your live event is that is not what brings the money in. And I know from personal experience, because I've applied all of my expertise on strategic events, applying the strategic part to the virtual event, that you can do as much or more strategically in advance, during, and after a virtual event to make your return significantly greater than you might have experienced in the past.
I can't tell you how many in-person events I've been involved in where the energy is super high and then the event ends and there's a lot of data loss that goes on, a lot of information loss because, it's not digitized by default like in the virtual.
Right. One of the key techniques that I use in virtual events, especially, but also for live events, is send your guests, once they've bought a ticket to the virtual event or the live event, send your guests information about your organization. Send them guidance, especially if they're first-time attendees. Send them guidance. Here's what you can expect to experience. We're going to have an auctioneer, or we're going to show you a video of the inside of our facility. Let them know what's happening. And most especially if it's a fundraising event, as opposed to cultivation or stewardship, if it's a fundraising event, let them know you're raising money and you are hoping that they will participate in the fund a need paddle raising, or increasing the numbers in the thermometer. A lot of times guests think that by buying a ticket, the ticket price is the money that's being raised. And that ain't it. That's
Yeah.
if you're
That's-
lucky,
that
you're
keeps the
barely
door open.
covering your expenses. And that
Yeah.
goes for virtual or live events.
Mhm.
So letting people know, here's what and there's lots of extremely positive, enthusiastic, inspiring ways to position this. But essentially what you're asking the donor is, please engage with us. And you're giving them a very, very detailed specifics on how much money you need to raise, why you need to raise it, what it's going to accomplish, and how important their role is in your ability to accomplish these things for the community, or
Oh.
whatever it is.
And
that
if you're asking them back, did you make it? How close did you get? Did you make it over?
Yes,
That
and
follow-up is all
Yeah.
part of it. Yeah.
very,
Keeping
very
that
important.
conversation.
Yes, exactly. Very important afterwards. And
Mhm.
again, this goes back to strategic. Everybody likes to win, right?
Mhm.
So you have to, even let's say your organization needs to raise $500,000, but you have 1,000 people who are, that's too many. You're trying to raise $100,000, but you have 100 people who are attending your event. If you multiply that by your average donation, and you can use that, what that number is if you've done your data analytics. If you have your average donation, you multiply that by 100, you are not getting to 500,000. So putting a thermometer up there that says 500,000 and watching everyone witness it not filling up is not good fundraising. So
Yeah.
if you need to raise $500,000, sure, that's your annual goal, but you need to spend some time analyzing how much you realistically can raise during that hour. And
Mhm.
that's the number that you pick on the thermometer, so that by the end of your event, everybody is feeling like a winner because they all donated. They're all helping you get to your goal. And together, and the executive director, whoever is hosting the event, can acknowledge all of us on this call. We did it together.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. And it's an incredible feeling to be a part of something big like that, where you become we, and we becomes something really powerful for the community impacted by the nonprofit's work.
And doing that digitally or online, virtually, we have the opportunity also to take it over multiple days. It doesn't have to be a one night only kind of thing. We can run this program over a
Right.
week or a month, or
Mhm.
Right.
depending on what your effort is. I think that we've heard a couple times, virtual events can be less expensive. I think that's pretty certain for many reasons. You're not renting out a hall, you're not traveling. So, okay, we don't need to continue to have that discussion. But they do require human capital involved. And I guess what I think is important is that it makes things more accessible for folks. You might find availability from experts or special guests or VIPs that you would have never had the opportunity to bring in person. So keeping that in mind with your virtual. But along the lines of that human capital effort, I'll turn this slide back on. What was the experience, Sari? When did you know it was time to seek out a pro and bring somebody in to help you with these virtual fundraising programs?
Immediately.
Just from the get.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why?
Well, for starters, nonprofits almost by definition are under-resourced, and everybody in the organization is wearing a million hats. My hat's off to every executive director out there, because I cannot think of a job that involves more different skill sets and fluency across them than being an executive director. So to ask an executive director to find expertise within his or her own organization to be able to produce a virtual event is kind of
That's when you
outrageous.
get an executive director producing a virtual event themselves, huh?
Yeah, it's outrageous. And what you're going, if you go the super cheap route, oh, we've got a Zoom account, we can pull this off. You're going to get what you pay for. You just are. And uh, what I said earlier about how much you can do for your organization if you're on brand and you deliver a quality experience, you can deliver just as much damage to the credibility of your organization if you try to pull off a virtual event that is a waste of your donors' time. And unfortunately, I've been witness to enough of them to understand that um, you need to call in the experts, and it's just not an expensive thing to do. On top of that, the executive director or the program specialist or maybe the president of the board or whoever's going to be a part of your event, they are going to be nervous. Everyone's nervous doing this, and to ask them to be the controller in the production room while they're doing the event, it's too much. It really is too much. So
And what if something does go wrong and you're already riding on that edge, you know?
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Then
and
you're going to get yelled at.
right, and you're blowing it live with
Yeah,
potentially people who don't know you very well, and they're done basically.
reputation. Oof.
Mhm.
It's reputation,
That's true.
or
It-
people where there's a lot of money at stake. Your biggest donors might be involved, and you've just shown them you can't pull it off. So I just wouldn't roll the dice with it. And it's just um, it's very normal to outsource everything these days. You know, you outsource payroll, you outsource, you know, you don't clean your own office, you outsource everything. So you should be outsourcing something that's so highly visible and has such high stakes and has such the potential to do so much good if you get it right and so much damage if you get it wrong.
Yeah, sure. See, what were you going to say there?
Yeah, you're right. I've seen it so many times where if there is something that goes wrong in an in-person event, you have volunteers or extra
Look over
people
there.
or staff, yeah, running after them down the hall or something like that. We don't necessarily have that in the virtual realm. So our window to make that impact is a lot smaller in the virtual realm, but it's also more impactful. It's
Yeah.
also more cost efficient. So just because you have that narrow, smaller bit of time, we have to really make sure that that's on brand and that appears the best possible way it can present itself. So
And
I
when
like
the
that.
hour or the 2 hours is up, you're done. You don't have to mingle.
That's true.
I
Go
know
get
that's
your cup
something
of coffee
some
or tea,
people
right.
whatever,
enjoy that.
wind down.
That's right. And you still have your bunny slippers on.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
works. It's
exactly.
great. It's
It's
No one
great.
has
cute.
to know.
You're looking cute, and it's
You know,
great.
the other
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to mention about, that 1 hour window of time that you've got is, again, back to fundraising mode. If you're using virtual tools to raise money, not steward or cultivate new donors, I think that you are it's too risky to count on new donors, donors that are coming on board and experienced seasoned donors with you in that 1 hour to perform by opening up their wallet and pulling out their credit card. I like to ask ahead of time. So for your biggest donors, take the high stakes of the event off the table.
Mhm.
Ask your biggest donors before the event, hey, we're going to have a thermometer up. We do not want to start the event with the thermometer at 0. It helps our newer donors see that we have support. Could I ask you to make a commitment of $25,000 to get us started? And your donors will be there for you, and you'll get that commitment ahead of time, right? Just like the visual, you'll get that commitment ahead of time. And then those who are standing on the water's edge and see that other people are with you will join.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes the high stakes of the event off the table, because as soon as you are live, that you already have your strongest support with you. You've had those conversations ahead of
Mhm.
time. And then after the event, you go back to those donors and say, what a difference you made. Thank you.
Yeah.
You made that event
Absolutely.
successful.
And even the chance, if you get that commitment, have them record a brief message on their phone, and you release that. You put your little fly in at the beginning and a little lower third on that, and you release that as promotional material. Look, they did it. Why don't you?
That's a great
So,
point.
I mean, now that we're in this mode, people are used to video. That's not a huge ask for people anymore.
Mhm.
So that kind of brings us to a couple of tips we wanted to share. And as we're talking, I'm just getting more ideas like that one just now. Call us, we're ready. But sharing the goals and metrics on the screen, as we were sharing those questions just a bit ago, I brought that in using a tool called OBS, and I'll do it again in just a moment. Um, but that's nice because it doesn't take, right now I'm sharing a slide. It takes priority. It takes over the whole screen. You see a couple of other cameras on the side. But having it right in the middle of everybody's attention, but then also having times where that metric is in the periphery, it's riding along with those other videos, was a great little innovation that Sari helped us come up with, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And we
Yep,
did
that
that
was her.
directly from their donor website, just watching the thermometer grow. It would show the last few donor names if it was not anonymous. It was
Right.
a really great, engaging way, and something that people are used to. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just thinking of a good way to get it in front of them again.
And from a
Mhm,
nuts and bolts standpoint, a lot of nonprofits use text to give during a
mhm,
live virtual event. And so
Mhm.
you need a large screen like what you're looking at right now for people to read the instructions on what the
mhm,
number is that they need to text. And at the same time, you've got the speaker like me holding up my phone to say, pick up your phone right now and go into your text and type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
mhm.
hit send. People are actually much more comfortable with Zoom than texting money on their phone. That is
Surprising,
actually a
huh?
newer thing.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
actually have to take a little bit more
Mhm,
time with donors. People are like, oh, I need my phone. It does require some show and tell. So having the big
Yeah.
screen that diagrams out everything for them and
mhm.
gives them the number that they need to text or the keyword and
You're
then
And
right.
and the way
Sari,
we've
if I
explain it.
recall, yeah, there were not as many people who were texting in the beginning. They were a little nervous and unsure,
Yeah.
but once they saw, oh, their friends were texting and donating, they were able to do it. You're right. They came in much more towards the end once they felt comfortable with it and knowing that this was, here to stay and something that could benefit the program.
and like I'm trying to demonstrate now, you can be dynamic with it. Let's go back to the thermometer. Let's check in. We've all heard that before. You can do this
Mhm.
Yes.
online pretty easily.
Mhm.
And then another thing that we find is really wonderful is those breakout rooms for VIP meet and greets. Has been wonderfully successful, especially if you have, that superstar performer or expert or philanthropist that's coming to visit, getting those donors to maybe bid for a seat at that table, that virtual table in those groups. So we found that participation in those rooms, if you want to keep the conversation lively and make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak, 7 to 10 participants is probably a good number. But here's a chance for, your donors to, like Sari was talking about, get a group of their friends together. They purchase an exclusive table, so it's all their group together with your VIP that they're meeting with. So really great chance to get a little closer, bring them in closer to the organization, maybe grow that donorship base. Assign a facilitator with your VIP. You don't want to leave your VIP there alone. Nope. You have
Right.
an
Never.
expert facilitator that you've either hired or, we actually prefer to skill up somebody within your team that may be familiar with them to work with them. Really helps with the comfort. We're not recording these sessions. These are real casual conversations. Purchase those high value tables, I think I said. And you get that chance to make that really exclusive call to action. Now that we've got you here, Mr. Deep Pocket, here's our chance. We've wowed you, but maybe I'll stop talking about that because that's not my area of expertise. These are just
We try
ideas
not to
I
call them
had.
Mr. Deep Pocket, but
These are non-qualified terms I tend to use, but while you've got them and they're having that great experience, there's another chance to bring in that call to action because that's what virtual is all about. You're building the community, you're pulling them back in, you're setting them up for that next event a lot of the time.
Yeah, and can I just pop in here and say how excited I am about uh, hybrid events. I know people are looking at going back into in-person events, but the idea of the inclusivity that surrounds hybrid is pretty amazing. And so that means you extend your reach to far beyond anyone who can just attend in person. But what I've found with conferences who offer this virtual component, hybrid component, is that some people will fly all the way to a conference, stay in the hotel room, and then not leave the hotel room to go to the ballroom because they can just see it streamed on their TV. So, it's really great to have all these different options out there for
Mm,
every single level of donor you have. Because again, you might not be the only the only nonprofit that this donor is committing to. So what do you do to kind of stay relevant and keep them engaged, whatever they're doing in their life?
right. And I want to underline the fact that hybrid does not mean simultaneous necessarily.
Absolutely.
If
Yes.
don't
you
get me started on hybrid. Oh
Yes.
my God.
if you want
Absolutely.
to get the biggest bang for your buck at a live event, then that's your focus, being live. If you want to get your biggest bang for the buck being virtual, that should be your focus. And you do not need to do those two things at the same time.
Right. It's true. You don't want to create two different classes of participation in your event. But there is something to be said for, hey, we're doing this live. You can come in and watch it too. It doesn't mean you have to eh, go for equal experience for both groups all the time. It's about providing the
Absolutely.
access is the main thing, I think, a lot of the time. And people are, like we said, a little more understanding in this digital world these days because they get what's going on now. So a couple of questions have already come in. I'd encourage any other questions. Look, we're using one of those tricks to tell you it's Q&A time. It's below me, I think, on my screen. Um, I think this one's really important, and yeah, I think great way to start. A nonprofit that has a small budget, how do they even afford something like this? So we talked about ROI is great on virtual events. We talked about coming in um, with even a low budget, but how do they believe it? It seems like a lot of investment. I'd say there's a lot of time involved in putting on a virtual event. That's the big thing. Make sure you have your team gathered around you. But maybe you can speak a little bit more to ways to save funds and putting them on.
Sure, that's easy. I mean, when I've been working with Webinar, one of the things that has impressed me so much is that you're so committed to capacity building inside your client's organization. You help them learn what you're doing so that they can be a better client for you. So I've seen
Hmm.
you make a substantial upfront investment with the client. It does take a few hours to go through everything. But then once we were doing subsequent events, it was very fast.
Mhm.
Everybody knew what they needed to do, what buttons they needed to push, what their lighting needed to be, that they needed to be looking right at the camera.
You busted me
And
just now. I was looking at you.
sorry, and that was not on purpose. And that helps you save a lot of money over time. So
Mhm.
you're making an upfront investment with Webinar, and then everybody's on the same playbook. You just said it a few moments ago that you like to train your clients to be facilitators, right? So just by training somebody to be a facilitator, now they have those skills,
Mhm.
and that's a great way to make it a much more affordable endeavor.
You're right. If you think about it, there's a lot of catering companies out there that are used for events, but the catering people don't invite the staff in and teach them how to cook the meals too
Nope.
at the same time. So it is a bit of, staff training, team building all at the same time while we put on an event.
Yeah, the client does have to have some buy-in for sure. Yeah, it's not happening without them, but we can take a lot of that time and effort off of their plate for them. So many times I've talked to individuals that how many hours I've been pouring over these help articles, and I just don't get it yet. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing it for 15 years, so yeah, I get it. I remember what that was like. What about this one? The pandemic is over now. People keep saying that. We'll see how it goes. I feel like it's going to be a hot summer in California. Um, is everything going back? Oh, let's turn that side off. It's doing that funny thing again. Is everything going back to normal? Are we going back to in person?
Well, I think people are excited to see each other in person. If the last couple of coffees and I had a block party here earlier this week was any indication, people were hugging me that I barely knew.
The hugs are
But
flowing. Yeah.
yes, but as we said at the top of the hour, folks don't want to go back to work 5 days a week and do that commute. If they don't have to, they've shifted into new routines that they really like.
Hmm.
And that's a great mode to take advantage of.
Get them where they are.
Get them where they are. I am routinely watching professional development videos for myself during my lunch hour, sitting in front of my laptop. And it's a great way to capture anyone, even if they've gone back to the office. You are able to meet them where they are, wherever that is. And if they're really craving face to face, well, that opportunity exists again. So that's a win-win.
Yeah. I think it's the same way it's always been in this industry. I always use the 2008 financial kerfuffle as an example. I was working on the support team at Citrix Online way back then, and we got pounded with phone calls. And eventually, after some months, call volume went down, but it never went back down to the level it was before. And that's the
Mhm.
way virtual events always, it's kind of, they expand in a big lurching motion, and then it's adopted. People are used to it. It's in their business or their fundraising DNA, as it were. And you're not going to remove that staple at that point. You've put some time into putting it there. Let's foster it and keep it going.
And I was
But
just going to say, there's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship like there is, live event, virtual event.
hmm,
Nonprofits put out newsletters that might be better served up as virtual events.
it's a
That's an
long
interesting way
newsletter.
to
How
look
about
at
we
it.
make it a webinar?
Yeah, let's just have a conversation. Let me get you up to
Why
speed
not?
on what's
Yeah,
going
this is
on in our
complicated.
nonprofit.
Let's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or there's
Hmm.
someone I really want you to meet. You can put a photo and a bio in a newsletter, but it might be nice to let them speak to your donors.
Hmm.
Same thing with donor cultivation. It's very difficult to get people who haven't donated yet to your event, live event. You got to get dressed up. You got to go there. You probably need to buy a ticket.
Take
It's a
off your
couple
bunny
hours,
slippers.
right? But
Hmm.
if a girlfriend asks me to join them on a webinar for an hour over my lunch hour to learn about something that they've become really passionate about, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I'm in.
It's
So
easy to accept.
there's not a
Mhm,
one-to-one, there's net new opportunity that's
mhm.
so exciting for nonprofits to engage with their donors and build relationships. It's not an on-off button live event, virtual event.
Yeah. And those uh, new donors, younger donors, we've got a whole generation of young activists coming out. Let's see what they're going to do too. I
Well,
wonder what that's going
millennials
to look
are
like.
right. Millennials are so, they're breathing technology. I,
Hmm.
I feel like my generation, I'm a Gen Xer. Technology for us is like swimming.
Yeah, we
whereas
learned to do it
you're
young. Yeah,
gulping the
exactly.
air of technology. But for the millennials, they are breathing it.
Mm,
And this is how they want to interact with nonprofits. They
Mhm.
want to donate online. They want to scour your website for information. They
mm.
want to look up your 990. They want to see
Mhm.
how you're rated on Charity Navigator. And they want to meet the executive director on Zoom.
And they will not pick up a phone call, so don't.
And they won't pick up a phone call.
Get that digital plan in place.
That's right.
Exactly.
All right, this has been an awesome conversation, and I feel like we could go on and on and on and help hundreds of people, millions of people over time, but we've already gone past our time. Shirsi, finally, a final comment from you, anything you want to remind people of as we start to close out here?
Yeah, just plan, plan, plan. I mean, the industry is changing, but there's plenty of tools and resources out there to make a lot of new opportunities.
Okay, Sari, your turn. What would
I
you
would
tell
just
our
say
folks?
that we at Donor Boom advise you to take a moment to have both an executional plan and a strategic plan going into anything that you're doing with respect to donor cultivation, solicitation, or stewardship.
Mm. Yeah, if you don't have a plan, how are you going to repeat it for that continued success? We didn't even talk about making your content evergreen. It's virtual. You can record it all. Oh, you're going to have to come back next month.
Twist
Um,
my arm.
yeah, well, Sari, I know you're busy, but everybody else out there, you better come back. But we'll hear more from Sari. We're looking forward to developing more content for you. Come back at the end of every month. Thank you so much for joining us for Reboot and Rejoin today. We're on the OnZoom platform. You can find us on social at The Webinerd, and of course, check out the website, thewebinerd.com. Sari, Shirsi, wonderful conversation. Thank you both so much for being here. And to all of our participants, thank you for showing up. And to Sari's husband, we see you out there. Thanks for coming along. Everybody enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.